Good morning and welcome to today's program. My name is Joe Eggers. I'm the Interim Director for the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. I'm pleased to welcome our speaker today, Claver from the Aegis Trust for our commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsis. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce Claver. Claver works for the Aegis Trust and holds the research, documentation, and policy engagement. It heads the policy, documentation, engagement, and policy department there. Prior to his appointment as the head of the RDPE, Claver led the Aegis Trust's Archive and Documentation Center, which established the Genocide Archive of Rwanda in 2010. The GAR encompasses both physical and digital archives containing historical artifacts, reports, correspondences, and audiovisual testimonies about the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. He also led the development of the Ubuntu digital platform and engaged an educational initiative dedicated to promoting peace and interactive learning and community engagement. This platform serves as a vital resource for educators, parents, and youth, empowering them to cultivate a culture of peace and instill positive values essential for the reconstruction of a resilient Rwanda. Following Claver's talk, I'm pleased to welcome my colleague Jillian LaBranche, who will offer a brief response based on her research. Jillian is a PhD candidate in sociology, and she's conducted 15 months of fieldwork in 2021 and 2022 in Sierra Leone and Rwanda. She studies education about episodes of mass violence and has worked closely with the center on its educational workshops and will lead a study abroad course to Rwanda next month, which we are very eager to host. So with that, Claver, I will turn it over to you, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's all yours.
Hello, Joe. Is it my turn, or for Julia to speak?
It's for you. Yep, you're all set.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to speak to your students. I'm really honored and privileged to be with you. And I look forward to the interactions and questions, and I will do my best to provide you with insights from Rwanda, from my lived experience, but also from my professional experience as a memory worker for the Kigali Genocide Memorial and the Aegis Trust. So I'm here for you, and I hope we have an interactive session today. So I don't know if I can proceed with a brief presentation on the topic, raising Rwanda's next generation. Is it how you want it to be, Joe? Or...
Yes, please go forth.
All right, so let me share my screen. Let me know when you see my slides.
We can see them.
You can see them?
Yes.
Wonderful. So we are talking about raising Rwanda's next generation in the context of Rwanda, which has endured the horrific genocide of the last 20th century. Where in the post-genocide reality, we have a very young population. We are almost 14 million now, and 65%, 65.2% of our population 30 years and below, which means that they don't have a direct memory of what happened over the past, during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. And these people, many of them have started taking the heavy responsibility of parenting the next generation. Imagine someone who was born few years before the genocide or during the genocide or a little bit after, in the aftermath of the genocide, who is today a parent. And what post-genocide realities show is that we have different sides. We have survivors, including myself, who are undertaking this responsibility in the absence of our role models, our parents who perished during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. And we are here trying to craft our approach to parenting in the absence of strong family structures we had before. Contrary to the West in Rwanda or in many African countries, we don't have parenting centers. Why? Because family meant that we had a structure that helps you to learn about positive values, about norms, about culture, on how to bring or undertaking parenting responsibility. But that was really shut down by the genocide, which was a genocide of proximity, where neighbors turned against neighbors, where very close friends turned against each other. And so in post-genocide reality, the lack of trust among people is something that is contributing to the lack of knowledge, to the lack of capacity for us young parents to understand. Connecting to that are memories of our lost childhoods. When we think about the past, yes, we have blissful memories, but at the same time, we are confronted with the horror we endured during the genocide and many years before the genocide. As you know, genocide is a process. It is not a sudden event. There were so many things that happened before the epic in 1994 that made us losing really our childhood. In my book, Transmitting Memories in Rwanda, from a survivor parent to the next generation, there is where I talk about internal persecution, which are contextualized to mean the difficult conditions our parents raised us in, but also the external persecution from, let's say, community, the school, where discrimination was practiced routinely. On the other side, you also have young parents today who carry on their shoulders the shame of their parents, who maybe some of them are in prison because of their participation in the genocide against the Tutsi, or who probably died in misery, life conditions in refugee camps, and so on. So these parents, these young parents, are today carrying the heavy responsibility of raising the next generation that has to know this past, this heavy past. And we carry this heavy responsibility of nurturing these young souls without spreading hate, without spreading trauma, or at least minimizing the effect of intergenerational trauma, because who are we? And I guess I've already spoken to that. When we think about our past, when we think about our relationships, our friendship, it all connects to the level of destruction we endured during the genocide and years before. And we really lack strong sources of positive things we can take to the young people. And the whole journey requires reflection, requires knowledge, and requires us to do really strong awareness for parents to understand why we carry this responsibility. Being in Rwanda, where the landscape speak to us, where we see genocide landmarks everywhere. I heard you will bring a group of students in May in Rwanda, but a quick example of what I'm saying is in Rwanda, we have more than 200 memorials. The past is still with us. We have reconciliation villages where survivors live side by side with their former killers or families of the perpetrators. And the past 30 years has been a journey of reconciling these sides, has been a journey of reshaping a new identity and really making choices that matter for the future. But as we, as a country, get stable, we are reminded of the work we have to do for the young generation to understand where we are coming from. And that requires us to embark on healing. And speaking to that, my writing journey has been a form of healing personally, because they helped me reflect on my past, really put or craft meanings of my past memories, but also bringing in the element of commitment to educate myself, commitment to educate my children, but also fellow parents on this very important subject. This current slide talks about healing and the experience, the lived experience is that healing has never been linear. And this is where genocide really hits, because we see it in all aspects, in happiness, in time of joyful moments. We feel this genocide because looking back, you are maybe graduating from university, or you are on your important day of wedding, but you look around and you have no uncles, aunties, parents to celebrate with you, and that hits even if there is some sort of stability in your life, but in that very moment you're reminded of what you lost during the genocide. And also, as a country, every year we take time to commemorate, to reflect on our history. And that happens from 7th April and lasts for 100 days. And during these 100 days, it is like we go back into what we lived 30 years ago. And I must say that it is a time that is not easy. So healing is an important element of this awareness campaign around understanding the responsibility of raising the next generation, but it is not a linear process. So there are ups and downs. Yet we have this responsibility of talking to our young ones. Yes, we will send them to school, but the school will never teach them our personal stories. They will not teach them about our personal view or lessons we learned from the tragedy and the recovery process we went through and all of that. And conversation, really open conversations at home matter. And here I quote someone who said that the child educated only at school is an uneducated child. And this quote really brings in the weight of parents' time to speak their children, to shape their minds, because parenting is indeed shaping, is showing the way, and allow the open conversation to happen. And what we experience, speaking at least from my personal experience and also sharing the experience of fellow parents, we share the same stories, is that in their innocence, children ask very, very complicated questions. And it is not always easy for parents, because they just ask in their innocence and they expect us to respond. And when healing is not yet matched, it becomes very, very difficult for parents to answer. And sometimes we intend to say, We will talk to you later. We'll explain when you grow up. We'll do this and that. But in the meantime, there are things they learn from the community. There are things they learn from the media, from internet, from the school, and all that. And so very quickly, I have reflected on those challenges, on who we are as parents, connecting our past to who is who, a survivor, someone coming from perpetrator's family, or a returnee, someone who was not in Rwanda by the time of the genocide, but who discovered a totally destroyed country and had to witness how Rwanda has been recovering from this heavy past. And in my recent book, in its final chapter, the 10th chapter, I proposed principles that parents can try to see if we can allow this open conversation to happen. But also, these principles are there to remind us all, not only Rwandans, but also parents from other contexts who might be going through difficult times, that it is through connections that we make at early age that we are able to shape the minds, the heart, the compassion, the empathy of children, and achieve a nurturing space where we allow children to be children, to ask questions, learn from them as they grow, but also allow us parents to be vulnerable in trying to understand their questions and answering them. So these principles are there to kind of provide some sort of ways to approach this difficult subject. And we've got 5 of them. One is about parenting should include the full participation of all family members. And here, speaking to the African context of parenting or family education, we've seen that in the past, family education was only dedicated to women who'd spend much time with children. But in post-genocide reality, there is a need for all parents to participate in this conversation. It could be a man who survived and married to a woman who also survived, or who was not in the country, or who was born after the genocide. And for children to really get a sense of where Rwanda is coming from, and also to be given the opportunity to learn fully, all parents should participate. And that takes me to the second principle, where I argue that we should put our own oxygen mask first. This really goes into first accepting to reconcile with our past, allowing ourselves to connect with our inner selves and reflect on what we went through. And depending on where history puts you, you've got to reflect, to go back, to accept, to connect with your bad and good memories and make sense of them, so that when you're asked by your children, you are not surprised by the weight of the questions, but rather you know where to start. It's very challenging because most of us fear to connect back to our past, but it is an imperative step to take, because would you respond to a child who asks you about where grandpa or grandma is? So, and my argument to this is that the what is pretty much known, not in detail, but I'm very much skeptical about the how. How do we disclose how our departed ones were killed? And that is very, very important, because we've got to consider the age of children asking these questions. You're not going to discuss really very, very deep, heavy content with a child of 3-5 years the same way you will discuss the topic with a teenager. And I strongly believe that this journey should start early enough. Us disclosing not necessarily the hardship of the past, but really making sure that our children are able to understand who these persons we lost were. If I'm talking about my parents, before I talk about how they were killed, I would wish to convey a message about my relationship, my connection, my memories with my parents, and then at a later stage, come into details about how they departed. And this is what I called laying down strong foundation of making sure we are present in their lives. Before even we start talking about history, are we really present in their lives? And that is very critical, because in nowadays, where most of us are taking professional career, studying, working, where some of us are businessmen, businesswomen, there is little time dedicated to children, and that is very dangerous because we are kind of disconnecting. And you find many kids, not only in Rwanda, across the world, being in conversation, constant conversation with technology. And that is the technology that is going to kind of expose them to possibly wrong narratives. And that will be, again, another challenge later when kids are mature and start questioning even our honesty. And by doing so, by being present, by starting the journey early enough, here comes principle 4, where I talk about really trusting our children with the truth that we are able to refine and provide the details over time. In my children's book, I used light words to describe the dark past, which describes the genocide, which is equal to the genocide, but I didn't use the term genocide purposely because I really wanted to be descriptive, be very close to what we can call genocide, but I was very mindful that I was writing for children of 3 to 12 years old. And then after 12 years, then we will go into details and talk about genocide and all that. So trusting children with the truth is very important. Today, when my kids were little, we could discuss and the concept of heaven. Their grandpa being in heaven was, the theory advanced. But time will come and I will talk about that heaven and how they went there. But right in their early age, really saying they were killed by, machetes and describe how they were killed isn't something that is going to help them. And that is an exposure to intergenerational trauma, because if we are not mindful of that complexity, we are likely to cause harm to our children. The last one is principle 5, it takes a village to raise a child. Here, the concept was to say there is what we can really try as parents, but parents also need support, which is why I'm investing in creating content that can help parents, but also need collective efforts, learning from one another, sharing stories so that we can learn from one another, learn about the complexities around parenting in post-genocide reality, and as a community of parents, young parents today, be able to support each other in raising mindful, compassionate generation, full of understanding, tolerance, and ready to cohabit peacefully. Concluding to my short presentation, I would say that this journey, raising Rwanda's next generation, is an important one, very difficult, but possible. We've got to allow this conversation to happen. We've got to allow our kids to enjoy their childhood, contrary to the childhood we lost in our time. Understanding our past must begin with all of us, parents, Rwandans, But here I'm also speaking to parents in contexts where violence is escalating, understanding where we come from, and try to pick one or two or many lessons we can use to transform our lives is very important. In the context of Rwanda, I also argue that our life should not be summarized by the single event of the genocide. Today, Rwanda sits as an example of the dual nature of the power of human beings, the power to destroy, but also the power to make critical decisions destined to unite, to reconcile people. And those choices have been guiding Rwandans through their recovery process. And Rwanda is where it is today, obviously because of this sacrifice people are making. And I don't think many people believe that Rwanda could rise up again. Open communication, close friendship, really strong relationship, emotional and physical connection with our children is very important. Most of us did not enjoy that right of being connected to our parents because of the situation at the time, because of the stress, because of the fear. But this is something we've got to do. They are our children, but they are also our friends, because as they grow up, they become mature people who will decide what to do with their lives. And in shaping their becoming of adult people, we've got to be really friendly to them and very close. Lastly, this whole journey is filled with emotional distress. And I'm glad that as we recover from the tragedy, mental health services beginning to take shape in the country, counselors, psychologists being available to support people. And this is very important because the whole journey is emotionally draining, and we need mental strength to make it. The last word is to say it is not too late. There are those who listen to me, there are those I speak to, and they say we probably delayed, but it is not too late. We've got to start now, bearing in mind that we have to close these gaps if the journey has not been started yet. I thank you and look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you so much, Claver, for joining us today to share your very important work. Claver's newest book, Transmitting Memories in Rwanda from a Survivor Parent to the Next Generation, which is now linked in the chat, is one of the first books to document the challenges parents face when relaying their nation's history of genocide to newer generations in Rwanda. We know from other genocides, for instance, the Holocaust, that parents often refrained from sharing their experiences of violence with the next generation. Instead, familial narratives regarding the Holocaust typically began to emerge after a generation had passed. But unlike World War II or post-World War II Germany, Rwanda immediately began to grapple with its difficult history after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, even commemorating the genocide beginning in 1995. Today, children learn about the genocide in school, beginning in the end of primary school and continuing each year in secondary school. The government of Rwanda has taken extensive memorialization efforts, from the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center, where Claver has done his work, and hundreds of other memorial sites across Rwanda. It is against this backdrop that I conducted my dissertation fieldwork in Rwanda in 2022. My dissertation work analyzes post-conflict education comparatively. Specifically, I examined how parents and teachers in Sierra Leone educate youth about the Sierra Leonean Civil War, and how parents and teachers educate newer generations about the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And through my fieldwork, I found that despite significant scaffolding by the government teachers and parents in Rwanda face many challenges when educating newer generations, some of which Claver spoke to today. And whether it's formal or informal education, educators must navigate their own experiences of genocide, the emotions and trauma they invoke, and the formal history of genocide. And so I'm going to share a few of these findings from my own research. Of course, there are institutional challenges. For example, in my interviews with secondary school history teachers, I found that teachers must prepare students for success on the national exam. And as a result, lessons on the genocide often employ billeted lists that ensure that students may list the causes and consequences of the genocide correctly and understand them for the national exam. A narrative that connects past events and historical actors to the genocide or the history of the genocide consequently sometimes struggles to emerge. Furthermore, teachers are often apprehensive and nervous when teaching about the genocide, knowing all too well the consequences of division. Teachers are nervous of teaching about the genocide, afraid that they may unintentionally promote division in their classrooms. Teachers are acutely aware that they are teaching the children of individuals who survived and participated in the genocide, and the stakes are high for teachers. And some shared stories of having to confront genocide denial in their classrooms. Consequently, teachers reported that they do not share their own experience of genocide in classrooms. They stated that doing so would be highly inappropriate. Instead, teachers felt that in order for children to believe the genocide-related content, it was important for them to be perceived as unbiased by their students. Thus, teachers navigate institutional constraints, their own emotions and memories of genocide, with the knowledge of their students. And as a result, teachers often strictly adhere to the national syllabus and textbooks, again, relying on kind of those bulleted lists formatted structure. And that is one of the many reasons why these parent-child exchanges regarding the genocide are so important. When children return home from school with many, many questions, parents must fill the gaps. And importantly, parents often provide the narrative arc that may be missing or lacking in formal education. Rather than trying to tell a formal history of genocide, parents often rely on their personal experiences during that time. And in doing so, parents paint a more detailed picture of Rwanda's history than can be offered by potentially formal education. Yet, as Claver's presentation showed, parents also face challenges and have much less resources guiding them than teachers. And in my interviews with Rwandan parents, I found that parents embrace the new Rwandan identity that has replaced previous ethnic identities. But for some parents, this eradication of ethnicity was a challenge. They struggled to discuss the genocide and ethnic conflict without discussing ethnicity. And similarly, some parents reported that their children often asked which ethnicity they belonged to, and these were difficult conversations. And parents chose to answer those questions differently. Yet perhaps one of the most difficult questions for parents was explaining why genocide happened, why people decided to participate. Parents often reported struggling to answer these questions, remarking that there was no good reason. Instead, parents often chose to focus on the strides Rwandan society had made, emphasizing reconciliation and progress, projecting a forward-looking perspective. These were conversations parents felt most comfortable engaging in. Parents often took pride in the fact that their children were being raised in an environment that embraces reconciliation and peace, an environment in which they are not taught about ethnic divisions. Many parents express hope for this next generation. Again, we thank you, Claver, for being with us today to share your insights and important work. And I highly recommend everyone read his book. It is fantastic. And I encourage you all to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A function, and we will present them to Claver. And while you're compiling your questions, I'll start with one of mine. Claver, Rwanda has been lauded for its great success and progress since the genocide. For instance, the attraction of foreign direct investments, low maternal mortality rates, and most relevant for our discussion today, the extensive memorialization and reconciliation efforts. What do you think other countries and their citizens can learn from Rwanda, particularly parents in divided nations? What can they learn from Rwandan parents?
Thank you for the question. In my opinion, I kind of touched on that one. I think one is that a journey to peace is possible. After a society has endured loss and destruction, journey to peace is possible, but it requires sacrifice. It requires making really choices, positive choices that will save the future. And reflecting on a few years after the genocide, we see some difficult decisions that were taken, but which allowed Rwanda to be where we are today. A quick reference would be on the Gacaca, for instance. Gacaca, these were grassroots trials which tried genocide cases, allowed perpetrators and survivors coming together in a community to listen to each other. And that's how so much about how genocide was committed went out. And that's how survivors were able to know where their loved ones were thrown, and exhumation followed and dignified burial followed. And that process not only provided justice to survivors, but also allowed survivors to heal somehow. Because culturally, when you bury someone, it's a kind of goodbye, proper goodbye. You're able to kind of, accept that you have lost them and you are starting a new life. So Gacaca time allowed that process to happen. But also on the other side, it allowed perpetrators who were willing to confess. And that's how reconciliation started, forgiveness started. And today, with the power of forgiveness and reconciliation, with the difficult choice of using Gacaca as a model, Rwanda has emerged strong in shaping one identity. And today we have Ndumunyarwanda, or I'm Rwandan, which is not only about being someone from Rwanda, but enjoying the rights of being a citizen. And I feel like that is something that other countries can learn from Rwanda. We see discrimination everywhere, even the states, in the United States, I believe there are cases of discrimination. Really coming together and say, we are human beings after all. We can push for understanding and tolerance. And when that happens and people come together and work towards one common goal, recovery and social reconstruction happens. And many communities today need that to happen. Another thing is also commitment and consistency along the way, because this could have happened, but if Rwandans were not committed to pursuing, the sacrifice that comes along with the decisions that were being made, then we wouldn't be where we are today. Also, allow learning to happen as you try to recover from something, because all these concepts, all these homegrown solutions that Rwanda has been implementing were not written on the stones. They are things that were gradually refined over time to address real issues as Rwandans were healing from the tragedy, and the journey continues. I wouldn't say that we have healed or we have achieved a total healing, total reconciliation. Where we are today allows us to do things even better than where we were a few years ago. So striving to be better and to allow progress to happen is key to this. For parents in other contexts, I think at personal level, we've got to ask ourselves, where do we want the next generation to be? Do you want the next generation to continue in the cycle of violence, in the cycle of discrimination? And if the answer is no, then what choices do we make? And how do we participate in making sure that from ourselves, as designers of the future that we want for the next generation, how do we want to behave in this process? Because the next generation is going to pick examples from how we behave. Not what we say, but how we participate in making sure that the future is saved. So answering to your question, I think that is what I can share from Rwanda.
Thank you, Claver. We've actually got a few questions in the chat here, and I'll start with the first one from Brooke. Thank you so much for your remarks, Claver. Though many of the children and young adults you've spoken about in your presentation are still very young, have you seen any examples of this next generation themselves taking steps to preserve genocide memory or educate others about the genocide? As they continue to age and begin taking on roles at places like the Kigali Genocide Memorial, what do you think they will need to do to prepare for their role as carriers of this knowledge?
Thank you, Joe. The young people are given chance to participate right from different age groups, and we have so many, for instance, youth-led organizations that are participating in different initiatives about preserving the memory. And preserving the memory is not necessarily about documenting the past. It is also about speaking about their experiences and young people on how they're interacting with their parents and the experiences at the school, but also um, how, as young people, they want to participate in the future that the country is wishing for them. And a concrete example is when you Google, we have, for instance, a youth-led organization called uh, Peace and Love Proclaimers. And Peace and Love Proclaimers is known for having proposed a walk to remember as a part of commemoration activities. And a walk to remember is organized now across the world where Rwanda embassies are, and it is a work that represents or offer a time for reflection for participants, which is followed by a conversation, intergenerational dialogue between young and adults, or even old generation, to exchange, to kind of bring the past close to the young people, but also the young people having the opportunity to speak to the older generation, asking questions, and also sharing the aspirations of the future. And that's how the two generations are speaking to each other. So they are given opportunity, and in the professional field, we also see brilliant young people using their talents to join um, um, organizations that are invested in memory preservation. At the Kigali Genocide Memorial and Aegis Trust, where I worked for 10 years, we could see, for instance, young educators coming to join the peace education program because they were interested in learning, but also using their knowledge in training teachers, training parents, and training fellow young people. So I think the opportunity to serve that is given to young people is, in a way, a process that allows young people to be part of the future. If I correctly had your question, that's how I can respond to that. Participation of young people in everything going on in Rwanda at different age and in different domain is promising.
Thank you so much. We have another question here from Joachim. Claver, I appreciate your presentation. Thank you. Having grown up in a post-genocide society myself, I very much appreciate the educational efforts you and Jillian speak about for Rwanda. My own work is on justice responses to mass violence. I am thus interested to know if you provide any of the evidence in your data sets repositories to prosecutorial agencies, and if there is a demand that reaches you from such agencies.
Thank you, Joachim, for the question. There is no open data per se, but I would rather talk about the ongoing effort to digitize records from Gacaca trials, which Kigali Genocide Memorial and Aegis Trust has been part of. We have already scanned over 63 million pages of handwritten documents. They are now being indexed, put in a digital repository, and we hope in the future there will be, of course, restricted access to that, but there is also level of opening these records for public use, but it will obviously take into consideration of the sensitivity around some of the information from the trials. So currently, we don't have any repository open for public use, but if he's interested in some key data, he can write to the National Prosecutor's Office and present his concept note of his research, and he can be helped.
Wonderful, thank you. We have another question here from Cynthia. It says, can you address how, with the backdrop of official policy of lack of ethnic information, children begin to understand the concept of ethnicity, which was central to the genocide? At what age and how do you approach it with children? Do they feel and recognize in their daily life, despite the efforts to downplay this ethnicity?
The issue of ethnicity today isn't, I would say, of news, but it is obviously used to explain the past. However, when we talk about the present and the future, the shaped identity, the new identity of shared identity of being Rwandans is pushed forward. But you can't explain that there has been a genocide committed against the Tutsi without explaining this background around ethnicity in Rwanda. So that is purposely used when explaining the past and showing how the genesis of these ethnic groups came and the destruction they caused, and the reason to why a new identity today, an identity that brings together people sharing one language, one culture, is an important one, rather than really seeing ourselves in the lens of Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa. So it is discussed in trainings, in workshops, at school, though it remains a sensitive topic, but the present and the future, the identity that Rwanda is shaping is a common one. Feel Rwandan, be Rwandan, and that is the important one. And that had to be also supported by different decisions like removing ethnic group in our new ID cards, making sure that free movement of people in the country and outside the country is achieved, which was not the case before the genocide, really giving freedoms and rights to people. A quick example for Cynthia to understand. Today, you are given position or you are given a scholarship based on merit, on how you performed. But back in time, because of the segregation, because of the discrimination, there was what was called quota system, which allowed Hutu, for instance, to be given positions, to be given scholarship based on who they were. And it wasn't about performing well, it is about who is allowed to go to the next level. So the moment policies in place are about equal rights, I think it speaks to the one identity that the country is shaping. At what age students or children start to learn about that? With the new curriculum, which is in use since 2015, 2016, the introduction to genocide studies begin in primary 5, but really extensive narrative about the genocide against the Tutsi begins in primary 6, when children are 12 or 13, and then it goes It continues in secondary, and then at university, those who choose social studies will even learn more and be given assignments to dig deeper and learn about the history. The reception so far, I would be lying if I tell you that I have a comprehensive kind of feedback on that. But because of the support systems in place, and this is where, again, parenting becomes very critical, there are things, I would say, collective narrative that is taught at school, but it comes back to parents at home to clarify or to even kind of make a connection. Where do we belong in this immense history that we are learning at school? And this is the reason why I advocate for continued awareness and support for parents, because many of these parents do not know do not know this narrative. They don't know how they can speak or answer questions coming from children. So we see this pressure of children who are learning about national narrative from school settings, pressure to parents to fit their personal histories into the national narrative. And this will be a long journey because it is not a conversation of one day or just 1 year. It's pretty much the whole life.
We have one last question here from Nika. It says, thank you, Claver, for speaking to us today about this important topic. I'm interested in the role of art in various forms of creative expression in processing and healing from past mass violence. Are there any Rwandan examples of art or cultural production being used for this purpose?
Come again? I need to.
Wondering about art as a form of healing. If you can talk to about any art or cultural work that's being produced to work towards healing in Rwanda.
I would maybe refer him to some work being done by Aegis Trust under the research department. We commission research projects done by independent researchers to zoom into these topics and help us learn, produce knowledge that we can use to understand how the recovery is going on. And we just put the link in the charts. If they could visit what is called Genocide Research Hub, there is a variety of topics and produced research papers that can really inform them about different topics, different perspectives, including the one is just raised around healing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
But at the same time, allow me also to say that the civil society organizations are supporting the government to support different communities. For instance, we have non-government organizations working to support survivors. At the same time, those working to support genocide perpetrators who are being released from the prison because their sentences are over now. So reintegrating them into the community is a process that obviously goes hand in hand with supporting them psychologically, and that is part of the healing journey I was asking about.
Thank you so much for sharing. And with that, I think we're nearing our full hour. So Claver, I'll invite you to share any last thoughts before we leave today. Any closing thoughts to share?
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I hope this becomes a continued learning process. Thank you for the questions, and I wish you the best on your journey to Rwanda in a few weeks. And I hope that those who will come will be able to explore, to visit Rwanda and share their learnings when they get back home. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Claver, and thank you everyone for joining us, and Jillian for sharing some of your work. And a recording of this event will be made available on our YouTube channel in a week or so. But Claver, thank you again so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.